And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 254. Today we're talking about whether we niche or not niche, whether we generalise or we specialise, whether we stick to what we know or we push ourselves outside of our comfort zone. So in a slightly new idea and a slightly new format, this is more of a discussion. So if you happen to be watching live, I want your comments, I want your input. And if you're not watching live but you're watching the recording, still leave comments down below because it will be interesting. I think this is one of those episodes where we'll be coming back to it. And anybody watching in the future can then take a look at how other people have responded to this idea. So there is no right or wrong answer as such. There's what makes sense to you in your particular journey as a photographer. So leave a comment, say hello, do all the usual bits, and we can make a start. So yes, and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 254. If you do happen to be watching live though, leave a comment, let me know you're here, let me know what the weather's doing, and we can kind of get the chat going. And like I say, in a sort of slight difference of thing, this episode is about it's more of a kind of, I want it to be more of a discussion about this idea of specialising, generalising, doing lots of different things, zeroing in on one kind of thing, because everybody's got a slightly different opinion on it. Several people have sent me notes and ideas, so I'm going to be going through them. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. I can see we've got a couple of comments in already. Nadia joins us and says, hello everyone from a sunny Fife. Susan says, hello from a beautiful day in Kirkcudbright, warm and sunny, just how I like it. Yeah, well, here in Castle Douglas, I have to say, which is 9 miles along the road from Kirkcudbright, the sun has come out, although it has been kind of just overcast, warm, but not particularly sunny for most of the day. It looks like the sun's starting to peek through just now though. Janet says hi from a warm but not too hot Mississauga in Canada, and John says hello from a very nice day in Ohio. Excellent. Right, well, we have people here. So before we make a start properly, a quick update on this Smug Points situation. So, currently leading in August is Janet on 35 smug points, Eamon has 25 smug points, Viji has 15, and April, Meg and Marilyn are all joined on 10 smug points each. So the whole idea with the smug points is you get the smug points to do with your contributions. So if you leave a comment here live, if you happen to be watching live, leave a comment, let me know, automatic 5 smug points. If you happen to be if you contribute to sending in an image for feedback, critique, you get 25 smug points. If you enter one of the challenges, you get 10 smug points. There's various bonus smug points around as well. And certainly if you contribute to this discussion today, you'll get a bonus 10 smug points as well, because this is a really interesting topic. And the whole idea of this is that, well, what we're talking about then is this idea of, should we niche? Should we go specialise? Should we sort of zero in on one particular genre or type of photography and really learn to master it? Or should we be kind of spreading out and trying lots of different things and not being restricted? Well, Viji's joined us, says, good evening friends from a slightly cooler Chennai. And I bet Viji's slightly cooler Chennai is still way hotter than the rest of our hot sunny days. Welcome, Viji. So, yes, should we? So let's to make a start on this. Then, I mean, really, what we're talking about is this came from Susan. So Susan won the Smug Points leaderboard for July, and we're discussing different ideas. And one of the things was the negative space, which of course I talked about last week in photography, and that we've got the negative space challenge coming up next week. But one of the other things she said was she was really curious about the notion of whether you should specialise or not. And in her email to me, Susan said, all the famous photographers of the past, Ansel Adams, Henri Cartier-Bresson, Dorothea Lange, etc., had their own style and genre of photography. Should we follow their example and stick to what we're best at? Or should we break out of the mould and step away from our comfort zone? And this is such a brilliant topic. And of course, I can turn you around and say what I think is just my idea on it. But I thought what I wanted to do was really open this idea up to discussion, because everybody's going to come at it from a slightly different way. And one of the key things here is, do you want to be another Henri Cartier-Bresson? Do you want to be another Dorothea Lange? How famous do you want to become with your photography? Or are you making a living out of your photography? Because I think it's slightly different if you're a professional. Generally speaking, it kind of depends as a professional where you're pitching yourself. A generalist photographer who does a bit of everything is more of a kind of a gun for hire as such, so you're not necessarily going to be making the big bucks, and you're working on the idea of convenience, of quickness, of probably smaller jobs, and churning them out without a great deal of creativity and high-end skill needed. Whereas if you want to be able to charge the slightly bigger bucks, then at that point you do need to specialise. You've only got to kind of think of, imagine that you are wanting, for example, somebody to photograph your wedding. Now, if you go to 2 websites that say they do wedding photography, one website does wedding photography, but they also do landscape, and they do wildlife, and they do portraits, and they do still life, and they do product photography, and they've got holiday snaps, and they do wedding photography. The other site just does wedding photography. Which one are you going to feel more confident is going to actually really deliver you the kind of wedding photos you want? Now, maybe if you're on a low budget and you just need somebody to take a few snaps, fine, the cheap one, you're going to go for the one who maybe does it all because they will be cheaper. But if you want somebody who is really going to give you the kind of wedding photos you desperately want to have and that you really want to have something special, well, of course, you're not going to go to a generalist, you're going to go to a specialist. And I think that's true of pretty much all forms of photography, but that's at a professional level. Marilyn's joined us as well, says hello from sunny Colorado. So, with this idea in mind, though, where do we go from here? So, I thought, well, one of the other things I'm going to try out today, as well as this being a discussion, there's the option of in-podcast polls. Now, I'm just going to try this out. So, there's a little option here. So, I've just clicked a little bit down here, and I've not tried doing this live, so you will have to bear with me. I can start a little poll here, and I can create a poll. And so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little poll. I'm going to call it, are we going to ask a question, to niche or not to niche? And option 1, go niche. Option 2, not niche. Add an option. And option 3, bit of both. Now, if I'm lucky and I hit start poll, those of you who are watching live should now have actually got this coming up in the chat. Okay, so here's your option. If it hasn't turned up in the live chat, let me know. But hopefully it has. So start. Put in your little. If you think you should go niche, hit go niche. If you think you should not do niche, you should generalize and push yourself out into lots of different things. Click not niche. And if you think, well, actually you should specialise, but then you should also try other things as well, click bit of both, okay? And we'll see what we get, okay? So there we go, quick poll going on. And already I'm seeing little bits kind of sliding up and down here as people are... That's great. Actually, I think this is kind of fun here, isn't it? So I've got... okay, so we got a couple of comments here as well. Oh, Susan says she wouldn't touch wedding photography with a barge pole. Marilyn says, I agree, Susan. Now, John says, my current opinion is that photographers that stick to a popular or successful niche tend to do well. However, I prefer to be a generalist. When someone asks what I shoot, I reply Americana and models. But Nadia also agrees with Susan, wouldn't touch wedding photography. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. Wedding photography is a particular kind of there's a whole set of skills you've got to have, which is much more than just about going click. And even if you have a good eye potentially for shooting weddings, can you cope with the people? Can you cope with all the other things that are actually needed? So that's one of those kind of interesting things. Oh, John also says, I'm with you, Susan. So basically, pretty much everybody here says they would avoid wedding photography. I need a wedding photographer to come in and tell me something different. If you happen to be watching the recording of this and you are a wedding photographer, leave your comment and thoughts below. That could be really interesting. Viji says, I'm a cat on a wall. As I'm not a professional photographer, I would opt for all types of photography. Okay, so Viji is then talking about this notion of, again, being a generalist, because she's not going for a sort of single idea of profession. So that was just me turning around to grab my water. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to click End Poll and see what happens. Now, do we have results? Yes, there we go. Results should now have cropped up. So not niche, 42%. Go niche, 28%. Bit of both, 28%. Poll complete, 7 votes. So out of the 7 of you then. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. So the not niche is the kind of the winner on this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this poll again at the end and just interestingly see whether there's any kind of shift, whether what we discuss, what other people say as we go, is actually going to have any kind of impact whatsoever on how you feel about it. So that could be fun. And also I'm going to drop in a couple more polls as we go, because the whole idea of this is discussion. So keep it going. Oh, Viji also says a big no to wedding photography, too much pressure. And that's kind of part of it, is pressure. There's that notion very much with wedding photography, and pretty much all kinds of professional photography, which is that if you have a client that you are photographing for, then their expectations are key. They're actually more important than necessarily your own. Well, I mean, obviously your own are massively important and what have you, but the point is that you can think you've got a great photo, and if the client doesn't like it, you've lost, okay? You're not going to make the sale, you're not going to get the job. So that notion of it's then not so much about you becomes really hyper-focused on this notion with wedding photography. Nadia's just said it's the pressure, as you can't repeat the shoot for a wedding. Absolutely. Get it wrong, get back home, find your wedding card has been corrupted, or that there was something stuck on the lens and everything's now out of focus, or anything like that, and it's too late. You can't go back and change it. So yeah, high-pressured environment that. Okay, cool. Right. So what I want to do now then is let's read. I'm going to read some of the different, because various people have sort of sent in, about a dozen people have sort of sent me, or not, about 9 I think, have sent me emails or put messages into the Facebook group or the Flickr group about how they tend to think about it. And so I'm going to read some of these. So I'm going to start with Susan, because it was Susan's idea, this whole thing. I wanted to know where Susan was coming from. So I said, well, okay, give me your thoughts on this. And so Susan said, so should we break out of our comfort zone in photography or stick with what we think we are good at? My personal preference is to stick with what I am happiest doing. In a way, it's easy to pick a flower, stick it in a vase, take it to my makeshift studio and snap away. I'm happy spending hours getting it right. What seems to make it even easier is when the results of my efforts are entered into the camera club competitions and they get complimented on by the judge. And yes, sometimes they do very well. Those few words of encouragement no doubt help to make one think that we're doing okay, and should maybe stick with what we're happiest with doing. After all, this is not a profession for us. We are not doing it to make money, it is merely a hobby, and hobbies are usually pastimes to be enjoyed, not to put us through purgatory. Fair enough. Occasionally, though, we have to break out of that mould and enter images into camera club or online competitions, which are totally out with our comfort zone, where the competition subject is something we were not normally happy with. For example, architecture, people, landscapes. Although I'm not particularly comfortable in taking these kind of images, it does push me into thinking that I can do it if I put my mind to it. For me, this is where being a member of a camera club makes me push those corners of the envelope and try things I would not normally do. I tend to lack inspiration in these genres. I made myself take my camera to a recent steampunk event in town, and although it would have been easier to take inanimate objects, I stuck to taking people images with differing success. Fortunately, steampunk participants are usually very outgoing and happy to have their photographs taken, so it made it much easier. So I tend to sit on the fence with this. Sometimes I'm happy with what I know, and occasionally I'll have a go at doing something different. And if the judge doesn't like it, I do tend to get a little bit disheartened. But that is something I have to deal with. Okay, So that's an interesting point. It's a starting point. So really what Susan's saying here very clearly is the fact that she's got something she does well, her still life, her plants in a vase, in a little studio setup. She enjoys doing it, she gets good results, she gets good feedback from it. When she then goes and tries something else, results are mixed, feedback is mixed, she maybe doesn't get quite the same level of success. And so this then sort of sets up a kind of feeling of, well, maybe I should stick to what I know. But at the same time, we're constantly being told that we should be stretching ourselves as well. And I think that's a really good kind of starting point. And as Susan says, if you're not a professional photographer and this is your hobby, then my God, yes, you should be enjoying it, or at least enjoying the challenge. That word enjoyment obviously means different things to different people. For some people it means a sense of peace. For some people it means a sense of excitement. For some people it means a sense of being on the edge, of challenging themselves. So, that's a kind of, I thought that was a good starting point. Viji agrees with Nadia about the idea the problem with wedding photography is you can't repeat, so it's too much pressure. Now, Robert in Texas, Robert Gullick, he came in and said, my personal opinion is that you should do what you love first, but when you get bored or stuck with it, then it's time to branch out and learn new skills or try new techniques. Currently, I've not been photographing. I haven't touched my camera or Photoshop from the time I came back from Egypt until the middle of July. I'm still not doing much. However, I went on a Dallas Camera Club field trip to a baseball game and took some shots, edited a few and submitted half a dozen to the Texas State Fair. One of them was a baseball photo and it got second place in the current events category. And my baritone guitar focus bracketing photo, this is something that Robert showed us quite a few episodes, several months ago. It's actually got third place in still life. I also entered my 2 cows photo that I'd made into black and white, and it won first place as well as best of show for the Texas State Fair in black and white. I mean, that's great. These are really good outcomes for your photography. But he goes on to say, I guess that taking some time away paid off. It's putting the spark back into my photographic journey. I've not done a lot of black and white or still life or macro photography. These will be my focus areas since the ones that I've done are getting traction. Perhaps street photography isn't my only talent. So so Robert's, with this one, what's happened then is Robert street photography has tended to be his first love. He's gone off, certainly his trip to Egypt, he was taking lots of photos, but then he's not really done much with his photography since. He's played around with a couple, got some good results in different categories, and is now kind of feeling a bit more enthused to go there as well. And I think there's an interesting point here, which is this idea of keeping your interest. There are various photographers I've known over the years who, when I met them, were full of enthusiasm. And then over the years, they kind of waned and paled off. And I'm sure, and certainly those of you who are in camera clubs will see this. There are certain people who you find that, or even though they might turn up every month to the camera club meeting, they've not really taken anything new in years. And it's like they've lost the desire, the urgency, the enthusiasm for it. And part of what you kind of need to think about is why is that happening and what can you do about it? Okay, one other thing I want to throw in here before I kind of move the next bit is part of a comment. So Robert Schaefer, who's not been joining us this year, he's been through a whole pile of personal difficulties and ups and downs and what have you. But I did ask him if he had any thoughts on this, and he sent me back quite a thoughtful email. I've got a couple of bits from it, but the bit that I want to take for this section of the podcast is Robert says, I'm no longer expecting every image to win a camera club competition or contest on Photocrowd, even though I may feel it is worthy. I've learned to take pictures that I like, and if it happens to win or place in a contest somewhere, then that's just gravy. However, I will admit that when they don't win or place, it's disappointing. Like every photographer, my images mean something to me and the memory that they bring. So, there's a bit here that I think was crossing over with what Robert's just said here, what Robert Gulick was saying, and what Susan was saying, which is about this notion of how it's being received by camera clubs, by online competitions, maybe even by the amount of smug points that you happen to accumulate on the challenges that I do here. And so I'm going to throw up another little poll here. So let's just do this. So if I click poll, start a poll, and this question is, how important is scoring well in competitions to you? Okay, so option A, not very much, and option B is more than I'd probably like to admit. Okay, and why can't I start poll? Must contain between 1 and 35 characters. Okay, I don't want to add an option. Remove that. Right, okay. Okay, this doesn't seem to be allowing me to add the poll. What do I have to? Right, that's 53, that's fine. Not very much, 22. Yeah, between 1 and 35 characters. That's, too many characters. Right, more than, okay, I'll just take that, more than I'd like to admit. Start poll. Right, okay, so you should now have the next poll has come up. How important is scoring well in competitions to you? A, not very much. B, more than I'd like to admit. Right, and then, now, what I would say here is it's okay to say that actually, yes, it makes a bit of a difference, because in the end, we are human, okay? We evolved in over millions of years, and at least as humans for the last 200,000 to 300,000 years, in nomadic tribal existence, right? Puny human, we were never designed to be some kind of lone wolf or live on our own. We grew and evolved as part of a tribe. And being part of a tribe requires a level of acceptance and a need for acceptance. The most dangerous thing that can possibly happen is that we are booted out of the tribe and we are left on our own, because then we are then just food for predators. Okay, now our society may have changed, but our brains haven't that much. We still have that same evolved brain that says other people's opinions matter. Now, we can debate how much they matter, for sure, but the reality is it still plays a part. And I think anybody who says, no, I don't care what anybody else thinks at all, is probably bluffing a bit, right? Now, you may have that to a degree, and you maybe over time you learn to get better at that. And it also, of course, there's a major thing here, which is, well, whose opinion do I respect? If somebody who's not particularly a photographer, I don't overly respect their taste, or maybe I don't even respect their photography, and they turn around and say they don't like my photo, well then that doesn't overly bother me. But if there's somebody whose opinion I really respect and care about says they don't like my photo, then yes, that can upset me a little bit. But then I can also take that idea and go, well, okay, now I'm listening to them. If I'm listening, do I feel they've got a valid point, and can I learn from that? Okay, so other people's opinions can matter. So I wouldn't get too hung up on the idea. I think there is a bit whereby sometimes we kind of want to say, no, I just do it for myself. But as both Roberts and Susan have indicated in their comments, is this idea that actually if we get negative feedback, or if we put our pictures out there and they don't do as well, sometimes it can just make us feel a bit ugh. And that in turn can have a feedback on our photography as to whether we're prepared to go into areas that are less familiar with ourselves, or whether we want to retreat back into the safety of what we know and what we will get the positive feedback on. So Susan says, great, Robert, your photography always appeals to me. I appreciate your feeling the lack of enthusiasm. I'm sure it happens to all of us at some time or another. Keep at it. Janet says, I can't remember the last time I entered a photo in a competition. Probably when I left the local camera club because of a change in my work schedule. I could no longer attend any meetings. That's true, Janet. But what about the online competitions? Are you not? I can't remember. Did we not meet in Photo Crowd? Might be wrong here. Janet also says, I prefer challenges or critiques. I did try Photo Crowd, but messed up on the login again and couldn't be bothered to figure it out. Fair enough. Viji says recognition from photo communities or competitions are important, but I truly do not expect at this point that I feel I will get carried away and start taking photos to please people. Yeah, again, I suppose there is a difference here. Am I taking photos just to get the respect from anybody else, or am I taking the photos and then hoping that I will get respect from other people? But I'm still going to do it my way anyway. Nadia says, I take photos for myself. If others don't like it, then that doesn't bother me. But yes, it's nice if someone likes it too. That's fair enough. Okay, so how are we doing on our little poll here? Okay, anybody want to... okay, so we're currently sitting at how important is scoring world competitions for you? Not very much, 57%, more than I'd like to admit, 43%. So it's actually, kind of getting a little bit split here. Getting 7 votes, so I guess that's 3 on one, 4 on the other. So yeah, okay, so that's an interesting. I'll hit end poll on that one. And okay, so let's move on to, I suppose then, here's a bit that I want to talk about, which is the notion of, well, what is it that actually motivates you? What is it that makes you want to do the photography in the first place? And what is it that keeps you coming back to it and wanting to carry on with it? And I think there's a whole bunch of different things here. One of the key things is, to go back to Susan's bit, which is a sense of comfort or focus or mindfulness, part of our mental health, really. Okay, so, and I'm sure we've touched on this before. Part of my own backstory is I took up photography, about 18, 19 years ago, back when I was suffering from much more strongly with chronic fatigue, and I had very little energy. It was my life felt like it was on hold. I felt like a whole chunk of my life had been taken away out of my control. And within that, I then discovered photography, and I discovered that it gave me this little corner of the universe where I could control it. Where if I pointed the camera at this angle, I would get a different idea than if I pointed it at that angle. If the light was coming from a different side, the picture would look fundamentally different. Then I could put it into Photoshop, and I could crop it, and I could raise the colours and colour shift and all these kind of things. And all this suddenly gave me an area of control in my life when so much of my life felt that it wasn't in my control. And as such, it was a salve, support for my own mental health. And there's an awful lot of people I've spoken to over the years, especially those that took up photography later in life, quite often took it up following some kind of traumatic experience, whether it was a health problem, whether it was death, divorce, some kind of other thing going on in their lives. And actually, the photography gave them another place to focus. So that notion of the mental health side of photography cannot be underestimated and shouldn't be, and is not to be derived. So if photographing what you want to photograph makes you feel a little bit safer, a little bit more secure, or just takes your mind away from all the stresses in life, then that's a really powerful motivator for doing it. But there are other things as well. This is the notion of mastery. Okay, so for some people, there's this notion of what I really want to, if I'm doing something, what I really want to be able to do is absolutely master it. I want to wrestle it to the ground. I want to become the best that I can with this. Okay, so now that can also be part of a control thing as well, part of your mental health, but it's a slightly different thing to say, I'm doing this because it makes me feel comfortable and calms me down, or I'm doing this because I want to create the best that I possibly can, and I want to keep stretching myself and stretching myself and stretching myself and absolutely master this. So that sense of mastery is a different kind of motivation. Then there's that notion of what we've just been talking about, which is feedback from others. Are we after praise? Are we after respect? Are we after smug points? Some form of validation. Okay? And again, for everything I just mentioned about being evolved as part of a tribal thing, that sense of validation is a really important part of who we are and how we operate in the world. And it's very difficult to shake that off entirely. And then there's another motivation, which is money or income. Although generally speaking, if we're really wanting a big income, photography doesn't tend to be the way to go. But these different kind of motivations really have a powerful part in why you might do photography and why I might do photography. But if we're coming back down to this notion of niche or not niche, that where you're coming at it from will also have that effect. Whether you're wanting to stay something that's making you feel comfortable, whether you're wanting to really niche and like I say, become an absolute master in one particular genre or more than one particular genre, or whether you are looking for validation, feedback, or even income from other people, finding something that you're quite good at, that you can almost guarantee you're going to get higher scores or possibly an occasional win in a competition, becomes an important part of it too. So we're all operating on a slightly different level, and depending on which level you're at, that's going to affect, I think, whether you decide you really want to niche and specialise in one particular area, or whether you want to kind of keep spreading yourself over as many different genres and ideas as you can. What have we got? Oh, Susan says she's loving the polls. Viji says, yes, Susan, I was not aware of these polls, but they are engaging. And Nadia agrees too. Oh, that's nice. Well, okay, maybe we can do that. If these are working, then I can try and introduce them and keep into future topics as well. That's good feedback. Thank you. Viji says, missing Meg. Yes, there is a point, actually. Yes, I forgot about that. Meg did say to send her apologies. Meg's away for the day. She's with a group of friends, and they've gone down to Blackpool on a day trip out. So there's a whole group of them in a little minibus, and she's going to be having lots of fun down in Blackpool. So they'll be gone she left at 8 o'clock this morning. She won't get back till 8 o'clock tonight. So she said she'll be watching the podcast, catching up over the next couple of days. But she did say to say hello to all of you. Right, okay, so now I want to talk, so to kind of expand out a little bit on the idea of no niche. So Susan is talking kind of, she's there with niche, different people, Robert saying start with what you love. Actually, just before, what are we saying? Oh, Viji says, hope she's enjoying herself and having great fun. John says, I always appreciate positive feedback on my photography. However, I do recognise it's not proper critique, as Kim says. Okay, that's I think that's yes. You see, that's a different. There's a different thing, and it's worth just a slight little tangent here. I think there's critique, which is where you have specifically asked for feedback, and when you are specifically asking for feedback, you're in a different mental zone. If you say to somebody, "Tell me where I'm going with this photo. How could I have improved this photo?" then you're asking for advice. Okay. The problem is sometimes people say, tell me what you think of my photo, and they're not wanting critique. What they're wanting is praise and validation. And if you give critique, critique will be, or feedback that's unasked for, then that will always be perceived as criticism. Okay. So if you stick up a photo, imagine it, you stick up a photo on your Facebook page or your website, and you're really pleased with it, and I come along and say, you know what, I think that, that's just that splodge of yellow in the corner is grabbing too much of attention, and maybe you should have just sort of got rid of that bit in the background, and you hadn't asked for that, you're going to feel really deflated. Okay. So I make a point of not giving feedback unless I'm specifically asked for feedback. And even then, when I'm asked for feedback, I kind of have to make a judgment here of, are they asking for genuine feedback, or are they just wanting me to say, lovely photo, so that they can feel good about themselves? Okay. Now, this is why within these podcasts, I set up the critique feedback sessions where there is no doubt, if you have put an image in for this is precisely for me to be able to give you positive feedback or critique, to be able to help you improve your photography, maybe help you to improve that particular photo, or understand concepts which would allow you to create a better version of that photo under other circumstances. Okay. And what have we got? Janet says, will she share her Blackpool photos? I have absolutely no idea. I did say to her, take plenty of photos. Whether she remembers to or not will remains to be seen. Oh, John says he likes the polls as well. Okay, cool. Right. So to go back to this idea then of, so what are the things in favour of not going for niche here? So a quick little entry I want to mention from Neena. Now, Neena isn't usually here. Neena is she's a writer. I know, I've known her for years via the blogs, but she does. I don't know whether she watches these, or she certainly doesn't join in live, but she always kind of follows the podcast with interest, or she appreciates the fact that I do them. And Neena said, just speaking, she actually wrote into this on the Facebook page when I put this up. She said, speaking as a writer, no niche for me, I want to experiment. And I thought, okay, the reason I'm including this is because in a way it's recognising that this isn't just a photographer's problem. This is something right across the board in so many different creative endeavours. Do you specialise in one particular area, or do you kind of go broad? And it's like, if you're a writer, do you, and you maybe, you sometimes see this with particular authors, they've maybe become very successful in one genre, and then they want to try and write in another genre, and they have difficulty with that. And a prime example of how that was tackled was, if we think of the writer of the Harry Potter series, J.K. Rowling. Now, she'd written worldwide successful, massively successful Harry Potter books. And so she was known for that whole kind of fantasy world of magicians and muggles and Hogwarts and all the rest of it. But then she wanted to write something else. She wanted to write about a private detective, about, real world kind of thing, and relationships between adults, and move away from children's stories. So she set up her set of books and actually wrote under a pseudonym. She wrote under the pseudonym Robert Galbraith to write a whole set of different books. And for a while she was just sort of getting along fine, and then somebody outed her as such. But she still uses that pseudonym Robert Galbraith for these other sets of books. Because once you've niched, sometimes there's a problem of actually trying to get out of that, because everybody's expecting you to do the same thing. Okay, now April, who again apologised in advance that she wouldn't be able to make it along today, but will be watching the catch-up. April said, my opinion on focusing on photography would be to not only focus on one genre. What I try to do is use as many forms of photography with one subject. For example, when I went to a peach festival, there was a field of sunflowers there. I did landscape, abstract, macro and negative space shots. I find it more enjoyable and creative. You also practice multiple genres with one subject in one day. And in fact, actually, in the Facebook group, April did in fact stick a set of photos. So I'll just show you these. So these sunflowers. So we've got a photo of sunflower in a field, but we've also got then the field with the truck behind it. And then she went for just the whole field rather than singling out a single flower. Then she sort of got in close. We've got the bee on the sunflower. Then she's gone in really close to the macro. We've got this little water droplet right in the centre of it, reflecting bits of sun and the outer petals. And so I'll come back to that other picture in a moment. So April's point here was the idea that what you can do is that she loves the idea that you can take a single subject and then you can just apply all sorts of different ideas to it. Whether you want to go macro, whether you want to go abstract, whether you want to go landscape. And another thing she could have done there is actually photograph people in amongst there as well. So she likes that idea of kind of feeling that you can do lots of different things with in one area. Now, Robert Schaefer, in the other part of his email, kind of echoed a similar idea. He said, I try to be the best I can at any category of photography that I happen to be shooting at that moment. I enjoy all types of photography, including above and below the surface of water. I don't want to limit to myself to just one niche, because I try to experiment on as many things in life, places, sites, etc. as I can, and my images create that memory for me. So when I go somewhere, whether it's a national park, new city, a field trip with the Dallas Camera Club, to somewhere I've never been to before, or just to try photography still life of stuff we have at home, I want to know that what I'm doing is the best image possible. So in that sense then, what's happening is for Robert Schaefer, the idea is that he just wants to be able to, whatever's in front of him, whatever opportunity he's got, he's just trying to create the best photo that he can. And it's not about specialising in one area, it's about feeling that he can have a go at whatever happens to be there. And then there's another aspect to this, which is the idea of kind of almost exposure to something new. Now, Viji when she wrote back to me, she said, when I started, I wanted to take landscape and architecture photos. I wouldn't have believed I would also ever take indoor still life photographs. My absolute nightmare, street photography. COVID-19 happened and Kim's podcast started. I started exploring all types of photography. I slowly started to feel comfortable with still life. Now my favourite has become still life. I feel a photographer should explore all genres to identify where his or her speciality lies. Okay, so I think that's a really interesting point. So what Viji's talking about there is this notion of, if we restrict ourselves to just one kind of photography, then we're potentially missing out on the discovery of other kinds of photography that we might eventually fall in love with. So this notion of going out and trying different things isn't just about expanding your skills in photography or whatever. It's about exploring, and I suppose another analogy on this would be a bit like, do you like, is your menu, what do you eat? For some people, they just want to stick with what's familiar, and some people want to try new things. And every now and again, when you try something new, you actually end up discovering some new fancy food that you had no idea you liked, and now has become a firm favourite. Okay? So, but of course, I guess within that, you also end up tasting quite a lot of things you don't like for every one thing that you find that you do. And maybe that's part of it with photography as well. We have disappointments, so we can then kind of go, well, maybe I don't want to stick to anything else. But potentially we could find something enjoyable out there. So I thought that was a good point that Viji's made. So I'm now going to introduce a third poll, which is an interesting idea, and it kind of extends slightly out of this notion of validation as well, which is, would you still do photography, or as much photography, if no one was there, if no one else was looking at it? Okay, if no one was going to see your photos. So let me just try a poll here. Now, this might be too many, so I'm going to start a poll, ask my question. Would you still do as much photography if no one was ever to see your photos? So, nobody's going to see your photos. Would you still do it? Okay. Answer 1, of course. Answer 2, probably not. Okay, start poll. So hopefully you should now get this poll coming up here. Would you still do as much photography if no one was to ever to see your photos? Now, if you happen to be watching the recording of this, please also join in with the polls, because I'd be really interested to know how other people are taking this on board as well. We've got the live here, but there is a space down below the video to leave your comments. And I think this is something which can go much beyond just this live thing. I want to see how other people are kind of coming in, and leave comments as well. Leave your thoughts and ideas. I think this is it's a really interesting topic. So I find this one particularly interesting because part of it is about validation. And I mean, as a professional photographer, I take photos, this is my living. If nobody was looking at my photos, I couldn't afford to make a living doing it. So I wouldn't take anything like the kind of photos that I take if there was nobody to look at them, because this is my profession. But then there's also this side of it, well, okay, say it was my hobby, would I do it? And if I'm absolutely honest, I think I would have a problem. I think my photography would just drop off massively. I do take photos for them to be seen. I do want my images to be seen. I do want to create better and better images so that I can put something better out there. For me, photography is a social thing. And my whole photography business has been built up around photographing people, because I love that interaction with the people that I am photographing. And then why on earth am I doing a podcast? And not just a podcast where everything's pre-recorded, but a live podcast. I love the live podcast because I want your chat. I want your feedback. I love the relationships that I've been building up over the years with people. So for me, this notion of the social side of photography is hugely important. And if I wasn't getting that out of the photography, I don't know how much I would pursue it. I think I can imagine quite clearly that it would really probably drop down to a minimal. I mean, I might still take photos for my own bit of fun, but I don't think I would do anything like the amount of photography that I do. But this is me, and I'm also aware that portraiture and that people interaction is kind of unusual in the photographic community. A lot of photographers are happiest not having to deal with people. The most popular genres are wildlife, landscape, still life, where you don't have to deal with other people. And that's part of the fun of it. That's part of the enjoyment. That's part of the saving your own mental health, is it takes you away from having to deal with other people. So in that sense, you know, if nobody else was to look at the photos, it wouldn't really matter because you're doing it for you. So again, there's no right or wrong answer with this. There's just a curiosity of, you know, where people might sort of sit with that. If I click on that, how are we doing here? Currently sitting with 7 votes. Would you still do as much photography if no one was ever to see your photos? 71% have said of course, and 29% have said probably not. What have we got? John says, I would like to think I would take as many, but in reality, probably not. Yeah, well, that's probably where I would go with you. Janet says, I think I would, but I don't think my photography would improve very much, as I wouldn't learn from comments and critiques. And I think that's a fair point, you know, that actually if you don't have that social side where you are getting any kind of feedback, then because of our own blind spots and the fact that we are blind to our own blind spots, we don't know what we're missing in our own photos, then there could be a point whereby we could go for years making the same mistakes without ever truly understanding. But then again, if nobody else is looking and we're not bothered about anybody else's opinion, does that really matter? Nadia says, when I started, it was to learn how to take photos of people, but I ended up loving long exposure nighttime with structures lit up. But being an old lady, I don't feel safe enough to do this on my own. Okay, well, there's a notion here of opportunity as well. The kind of thing that you're photographing. First of all, I will just say I've not met Nadia. I have no idea whether she comes under the category of old lady or not. Your description, not mine. But that notion, if you don't feel safe to be able to go and photograph the things you would like to photograph, then that requires an extra layer of precautions. Maybe you have to go to places where you know you're going to be safe. You maybe have to go with other people in order to make sure there's a group of you to be safe. Whether you are safe or not is that perception, that self-perception of feeling safe is an important part of what you're doing. And so we have to take those kind of precautions. So that's a really interesting point as well, I think, is that notion of opportunity. So what do we say? Oh, Susan and John both think that Janet's made a good point about the fact that she thinks her photography wouldn't improve very much without being able to get the feedback from other people. Okay, so I'll click end poll. Oh, okay, so what are we up to? Oh, 8 votes. We have got an 8th vote here. So, of course, is on 75%, probably not 25%. So 3-1 people would carry on doing the photography even if nobody else was ever to ever see them. Okay, I'll click end poll there. Susan says, I've met Nadia, she's not old. Okay, well, maybe feeling old is a personal perception, or maybe it's a quick defence getting it in before anybody else can level it. But the thing is with feeling old, I always say it's that bit that as we hit another birthday, whatever that birthday is, we've never been that old before. So therefore we tend to think, oh my God, I'm old. But as we get past that, and we're now older than that, we get to the next year, we look back and we'll never be that young again. So we know, got no idea why anybody's complaining about reaching that age. Right, okay, so let's move. A quick little reminder here, just while we're at this point, is that if you are finding these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining even, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can support these podcasts. And I have now, for those of you who like to do a monthly thing, when you go to Buy Me a Coffee, there is a little box you can tick for monthly if you wish. You don't have to. For those who just like to do the odd occasional random coffee, that's fine. But there is an option so that it will automatically take whatever number of coffees you've decided to donate out each per month. If you are one of these who likes to buy more than once a month, then you can either forget the monthly bit and just do your weekly one or whatever, or each week tick another monthly one, and it will then, after 4 weeks, it will just automatically keep taking it on essentially a weekly basis. But yes, in the meantime as well, click like on this video, by the way, if you are enjoying it. It always helps the Facebook, the YouTube algorithms, might even show it to somebody else. Somebody else might even stumble across this. So do click like, and if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe and click notifications and all that kind of thing as well. Right, okay, so next bit I want to talk about is, and we've kind of touched on this already, but is this notion of a kind of almost cross-pollination with photography, of going across with using different kinds of genres. So in this point, there's Mark Collins, occasionally put bits in, not one of the regular commenters, but he does occasionally put stuff on. And on the Facebook group, he wrote, I do many types: landscape, birds, wildlife, astrophotography, street, families, even a few weddings. The skills cross over, applying the skills learned from one area to another, and it makes me a better photographer in all areas. And I thought, yeah, there's a good point here. And in a way, this kind of echoes what I've been talking about since the beginning of the podcast. Why do I set all these other challenges? Okay, let's enhance this one with Janet. So Janet sent me this thing. She said, I've been thinking about this topic throughout the week, but not really sure what to say. I think the choice to specialise or generalise is an individual decision. But I do think it makes sense to try different types of photography when starting to learn or get serious about photography. It seems to me that lessons from one type of photography can be applied to others. For example, shooting weekly bicycle races a few years ago, and attempting to both stop the action and pan with the action has probably been really helpful when trying to shoot wildlife. There could also be times when a niche photographer doesn't have an opportunity to shoot their speciality, whereas a non-niche photographer has multiple shooting options. And that, of course, actually replies straight back to Nadia's point, which is, if she is niche on shooting nighttime architecture buildings, but then doesn't have an opportunity to do that, either because she doesn't live near the city or she feels unsafe when doing it, then suddenly that's closed off. And if that's your only form of photography, then it shuts off a whole chunk for you. But she says someone who specialises, though, is likely to get good at that one genre. As long as that genre is something you enjoy and is reasonably accessible, then it would make sense to specialise. Okay, so here what we're doing now is we're starting to come into the reasons to go niche. Okay, so here then I want to talk. So Marilyn, what Marilyn sent in, she said, interesting topic. I think both are valuable on our journey through photography. I began as a landscape photographer as I loved the Colorado mountains and wanted to capture them. Much later, I started joining online competitions and challenges, and found I wanted to compete in. Or rather, I found in order to compete, I then needed to expand my portfolio. As I tried new subjects, I found that not only was it fun, but my photography skills improved. Now I go full circle and apply new skills and ways of seeing to my original love, which is landscapes. Okay, and so this point here, this in a way runs through practically this entire series of podcasts for the last 253 episodes before this one. Part of the drive, part of the underlying thoughts and motivations behind this podcast is why do I keep doing all these different challenges? Why do I keep showing you all these things? So that you can take these ideas, you can push, you can expand, you can, by trying different things out, this helps you to expand your skill set. And when you expand that skill set, you can then bring it back into your own. Okay, and this is, I've become very, very aware of this, even with myself. We know narrative, portraiture, people photography is my thing. Running these podcasts for 5 years, my photography has improved dramatically in these areas, precisely because I have been doing all these other areas. I always did a little bit of landscape, a little bit of macro, bits and pieces here and there. But running these podcasts has forced me to learn so much more about these things, because you keep sending me images that aren't portraits, that aren't narrative shots. You want feedback on stuff. You want to learn about all these different ideas and concepts and genres, and how do these things apply. So I can understand things with portraiture, and then there's a certain level whereby I can there's transferable skills that go into other forms of photography. But I've also had to learn a lot more about these in order to be able to get across the ideas to you more effectively. So they always say the best way to learn anything is to teach, and there's no doubt about it. I've learned a huge amount by teaching, and by going out with my niche, I've then learned all these skills that I've been able to bring back into my niche. And so that really, that's worked very, very well for me. And that's echoing what Marilyn is saying there. Nadia says, I transition to landscapes, but always experiment with other things that catch my eye. Yeah, and I think that, that is that notion of, are there other things that you want to try and play around with? Now, the next bit I want to talk about, the final one, going niche and very much in favour of niche, was Andy. So Andy said, great topic, here's my 2 pennyworth. Specialisation is the way to go, although probably not in the sense you intended. For me, the key to successful photography is finding the work that excites you and ignites a drive to create. It is this passion and curiosity that will propel you forward to discover the technical and myriad other skills you'll need to produce fulfilling work. Once you've found the thing that excites you, you specialise in it. You may find that this is a traditional field such as landscape or macro, or a more nuanced one such as documentary that encompasses a wide range of technical disciplines. Once you have found it, you start your journey to develop your skills you need to create work. The skills you need to create your work. Some of these will be technical, but in many cases the technical will only be one factor. You will find yourself facing learning challenges, doubt and failure before you find your voice, and it's the passion that will see you through and keep you coming back. Okay, so this is an interesting one. It's the passion for your niche, and I think this, if you've got a passion for whatever, whether it's a passion for landscape or it's a passion for macro or it's a passion for people, then that's what keeps you coming back to it. When your photography is primarily driven by the idea of trying to win competitions, and then if you're, or score highly, but then you don't, it's very easy to lose the passion because you're weighting the results of how you feel about your photography on other people's opinions. Now, as I've said, there's always going to be an element of that. But if we place too much weight on how other people think, if it's only really about winning the competitions or scoring highly, then if we don't, we lose our passion, we lose our motivation. Whereas if your motivation is driven by a passion within, then no matter what other obstacles get in your way, you keep going at it until you overcome it. And this is a really important, for example, some of you may have seen some of the big shoots that I've done, and where I've had a team of people, and I've had hairdressers and makeup artists and clothes stylists, and we've had to find vintage vehicles, or we've had to find interesting locations. And what's happened is I've had people say to me, my God, I would have given up long before you got there. How did you manage to pull all that together? And it's because I had a vision, and I was so passionate to get that vision done that I kept going and kept going and kept going, where other people would have dropped off long before they got there. But at the same time, I remember my friend Alan, who's a landscape photographer. And I remember once meeting Alan in the afternoon, and he was getting supplies together because that evening he was going to camp on the top of a mountain, Scriel, for anybody who knows locally, in order to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get photos of the sun rising and hitting the Cumbrian hills in the Lake District over the Solway Firth. So don't worry too much about the geography. Anybody local will know what I was talking about. But the point is, the idea of camping on top of a mountain to be awake at 4 o'clock in the morning to take photos of sunrise, not me, thank you very much. There's no way I would do that, right? But that's me, Okay, and consequently, I mean, all my landscape photos tend to be taken within about 10 metres of where I've parked the car, under whatever light weather conditions there happen to be. Consequently, my landscape photos are never going to be as good as Alan's. But then Alan's portrait and narrative photos are never going to be as good as mine, because he's not going to put his dedication and time into overcoming all the obstacles you need to overcome to move to mastery and to be at the top of your game, because he doesn't have a passion with people. Likewise, I don't have that level of passion for the landscape photo, so I will never do all that overcoming all the obstacles that are needed to master that particular genre. Okay, so how far are you prepared to push? How many obstacles are you prepared to overcome? That will dictate how far you will be able to master a topic, and whether you decide maybe actually I don't have the energy, or I don't have the passion for one particular, but I'm happier just doing a spread of stuff. So you might even be doing a spread of stuff, but still it's in essence remaining within your comfort zone. Susan says, beautifully put, Andy, passion is the key, I think. Okay, so this comes into an interesting thing. It's a little bit, now Andy didn't say it directly, but it was implied in this, and this has really started me thinking here, which is where he says, you'll discover the technical skills you need to produce. You know, it's not just about the technical skills of photography, it's about the other skills out with photography. Okay, and if you are going to really niche, if you are really going to master your photography, it's not just about your aperture and your ISO and your shutter speed, and it's not just about your use of diagonals, your use of backlight, your use of bracketing, your understanding of echoes or rule of thirds or symmetry. It's about what else out with photography that you actually bring into it. And this is the really interesting bit, I think, that often gets forgotten, because we're talking about this idea. The great thing about doing a spread of different kinds of photography is that you can take these photos. So I do people, but by going out and learning more about landscape photography, it then allows me to photograph people in landscapes more effectively, right? Or, learning about macro helps me to, see details in a larger shot that I might not have. So we can take the skills of one form of photography and apply them to another form of photography. But I think when you really are talking about mastering a particular niche, you need to take skills that are out with photography and build them in. So in order to be able to be a good portrait photographer, I have to have a whole load of understanding of psychology and people skills, because most people don't like having their photograph taken. So actually, in some ways, me going click is almost the smallest part of what I do. In order for me to do these big cinematic pictures, I need to have an understanding of cinema and how cinema is lit and how it's composed. In order to do these painterly photos, I need to have an understanding of how the old masters were working, right, with paint and light and how they would, and their form of composition. So consequently, these different ways of, stepping outside photography, there's a whole bunch of other things. And we've got somebody called Photography Addicts who said hi. Hi, Photography Addicts. Welcome. But this might be in a different way. When I think about my friend Alan, the landscape photographer, he's got a background in, I can't remember whether it's geography or geology. But at the same time, he's massively knowledgeable on meteorology, weather patterns. Now, he can go off to places and he can see the way the weather is moving, and understanding meteorology and understanding geology and geography enables him to become a much, much better landscape photographer. My landscapes are, I look at a landscape, I go, oh, there's the hills, there's trees, there's a loch. Maybe I can work out how to get the light going so it's bouncing off the water and there's a nice little composition here. But he understands when he heads out into the hills or goes up into the mountains or out to the Scottish Highlands or Islands, what the weather's going to be doing, where to place himself in regards to where the sun is going to rise, where it's going to set, where the rain is going to fall, how long the rain is going to be about for, when the fog is coming in. Those understandings of meteorology add to his skill to become a great landscape photographer. But then maybe if you're into animals, or again, people, or models, or sports photography, understanding anatomy, understanding biology, these things as well will feed into your photography. So to really go niche, you want to be looking at what else there is out with the idea of photography. So I'm going to do another quick one here, which is, now if you have time to, this one here is, rather than start a poll, it's start a Q&A. And my little say something here is, what non-photography thing do you think you could study that would usefully feed into your photography? Okay. Now, actually, that's a couple of characters too long. Do you think you could study? Okay, what non-photography thing could you study that would usefully feed into your photography? Okay. Now, I'm putting this here not so much with the idea that you necessarily have to try and put an answer in here. Now, you could if you want, but I want to put it there just for you to have a think about, right? Is there something that you could enjoyably start researching, looking up, learning about, deep diving into, that's not about photography, but would in turn feed back into your photography? So like the idea of learning about weather patterns would help your landscape photography, learning about anatomy could help your sports photography, learning about biology or botany could help your plant or still life photography, even learning about ceramics and pottery might help your still life photography, right? If you're using vases or mugs or whatever. So that's really the question here. If you want to type something in, you can, but don't worry too much about it. It's as much there just to sort of plant that question, okay, because I think it's a kind of an interesting one. Now, the other problem with that question is it has kind of closed off the chat. So what I will do there is I will end the Q&A. So that says we'll remove all the questions in this list. Okay, well anyway, I will click confirm on that. So we're back to the chat. So I don't know whether that's stayed in there or not. Maybe it hasn't. Okay, that's a shame. Meanwhile, just try and remember that. Make a note of it somewhere. Is this notion of what non-photography thing do you think you could study that might improve your photography? Okay, or usefully contribute to. Now, finally, well, not completely finally, but kind of into the last set here. What I think, as we kind of start to sum up what's going on, what we can see is that there's a kind of almost a typical journey of a photographer. So when we start out with photography, very typically what we do is we start out very, very generalist. So we kind of will photograph anything. There's a nice bit of rusty paint, peeling paintwork. There's a flower pushing up through the snow. There's a tree with the sunset behind it. These kind of things we all start off with, okay? Whatever we've got a camera, we're starting to discover that the world looks different through the camera. We photograph anything and everything. We're on this sort of big road to discovery. Then I think the next thing that happens is we tend to sort of find that we're quite often more drawn to one thing than another. We get drawn to the idea of doing landscapes, or we get drawn to the idea of doing still life or street photography or something like that. And this kind of thing maybe means that we tend to sort of, because we've got a bit of an interest in it, we start practicing it a bit more. So I started off being very generalist, and then I discovered faces. And once I kind of discovered faces, I became fascinated by faces. And then I just started grabbing anybody and everybody that I could in order to take portraits so I could learn more about it. And then I started researching how painters had approached portraiture. And was just looking, and cinema was doing portraiture, and I was just looking and taking more and more photos. And so this allowed me to specialise. It also, because I had this passion for it that Andy was talking about, and so I did more of it. And if you keep doing more of something, what a surprise, you get better at it. What have we got? Nadi says, I used to do watercolour landscapes before I started with photography. Okay, yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Yeah, the change of when you're painting something to going to something which is then going click is not the same. It's transferable skills for sure. It's how you look, but the medium's quite a different one. Photography Addict says, I think studying movies would help me. I got bored of street photography, so I'm thinking of doing planned photo shoots. Like I really want to do the Last of Us themed one and The Greatest Showman. Yeah, you see, that's where I think that's fun. And Photography Addicts, I don't know if you have if you want to leave me an actual name or whether you're just quite happily being called Photography Addicts. But if you take a look at any of my photos, if you go to my website, perhaps kimayres.co.uk, go over to my picture gallery. So it says you can call me Matt. Hi Matt. Okay Matt, if you go to my website, if you go to the picture gallery, it takes you through to my Flickr site where you can see that there's various bits under Tales from the Shutter or narrative photos. You will find various cinematic style photos that I've done there. And that's very much, yeah, that can be huge amounts of fun where you say, well, okay, if there's a particular kind of movie style or genre or something that I would like to emulate, how would I go about that? What lighting do I need? What background do I need? What compositional tools are typical of the particular director I'm trying to emulate? You know, doing something with Wes Anderson is going to be quite different than doing something with Stanley Kubrick, although there are overlaps. So yes, there's all sorts of it. Or if you wanted to do film noir, or you wanted to do westerns or something like that, find the tropes and the styles, and then go, how can I emulate that with a camera? Lots of fun to be had there. Nadia says she also did watercolour portraits too. Yes, and I think that would feed in. Some of you may remember I talked last year or the year before about sitting for a portrait artist and getting my portrait painted. And initially I'd thought that painting a portrait and taking photos of portraits were very similar things, and I came to realise they're very, very different kinds of things. So we have this idea then that we take our photos, we start getting more drawn to particular areas, and more practice gives us better results and probably better rewards, as in we get better feedback from other people. We start doing better in competitions. Negative feedback on stuff that's not in our specialism can also then put us off and maybe kind of take us away from trying other things. But then there's this notion that we can try other forms of photography that then feed back into our key niche, or the thing that we're most passionate about. And then there's this idea of taking stuff out with our photography completely, but it's still feeding back into. Some of you may remember a few years ago, or a couple of times even, I've talked about the notion that I went and did still life classes for 3 years, and that changed the way that I perceived line, taking line drawings and then seeing how line was different, because I'd had to use my hand, eye, wrist coordination rather than just go and click with the camera. And then that fed back in and changed the whole way that I did. Not the whole way, it influenced. And certain particular pictures that I then did were very strongly influenced by that notion of line rather than the whole thing. Okay, so the other thing, and finally with this, what we are balancing with this is between your own and other people's opinions of our photography as well. How much does it count? How much does it matter? How special does it make us feel to get other people's feedback? Balanced up against our own passion for trying to do something. And actually other people's opinions splits into people who just give us validation and feed, and say that's lovely, and or even I want to buy that from you, or I want to commission you to do some photography for me because I love your photography so much, which is great validation. Or that notion of feedback as in critique feedback, helping you to improve your photography. So that kind of thing comes in too. There's a lovely thing from a friend of mine called Adrian. He's always very supportive for clicking like whenever I stick the podcast up on Facebook. Oh, I don't know whether he actually watches them. I know he's a bit of an amateur photographer himself though, but he rather amusingly put my niche was being a bit crap and not selling much. I've since found that I'm able to apply that same approach to many other things. Anyway, with that in mind, I want to go back. I'm just going to do a last poll, which is which is a repeat then of the niche or not. I want to see whether any of this has made any difference to you, this discussion. Do you feel now that you should go niche? Do you feel even more strongly that you should not go niche, add option? Or do you feel more strongly now that you should have a bit of both? So poll back in where we started. So tick your little answers here, and it'd be just interesting to see whether we've got the same ratio, whether everybody's feeling pretty much the same as what they felt when we started these podcasts, or whether anybody has actually changed their mind. So that's pretty much it. I kind of hope that you found that interesting. I think it's been a brilliant discussion. Thanks you so much to absolutely everybody, certainly those who emailed me, you writing stuff here live. And like I say, if you're not watching this live, leave your comments down below anyway, because I would be really interested in coming back to these. Now, what is it? Do you feel more happy specialising in something? Do you feel happier not specialising and spreading yourself wide? Do you feel like you ought to specialise but try other things in order to bring back into your speciality? There's all these different kinds and everybody's got their own slight nuance on that. And how much influence does other people's opinion have on you? Is it really important? Is it mildly important? How do you feel when you stick a picture into a competition and it doesn't do very well? Or are you sort of chasing the likes? Are you chasing the smug points? What is it that's kind of motivating, driving you? I think it really is a wonderful kind of topic for discussion, and I think it's something we will keep coming back to. So in terms of smug points, actually, everybody who sent me in will get their 10 smug points. Anybody who's contributed today, I think, even in the writing, and even if you sent something in, I think I'll give you 10 smug points as well, just for the writing, because I think this is, taking part in the polls and everything has been a fun part of this podcast as well. Marilyn says, very interesting. Susan says, thanks for running this, Kim. Great podcast. Excellent. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. Okay, so quick little reminder again, if you're finding the podcast useful, interesting, entertaining, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. Now, don't run off, because the other thing to remember is next week's podcast. Next week, we are talking about the negative space challenge. Now, if you want any reminders, go back to the last podcast, episode 253, where I went in depth about this whole notion of negative space, what it is, how to see it, how to play it to your advantage in photography. Okay, and there's overlap with how negative space overlaps with minimalism, but isn't exactly the same as minimalism. Minimalism uses negative space, but you can also have negative space which isn't using minimalism. So with that in particular, that in mind, so next Friday, what are we on? So next Sunday is the 31st, so Friday the 29th, try and get your images into me. Now, you can either stick them in the Facebook group, in the Flickr group, either of those. Stick your image in for the negative space challenge. Tell me a little bit about the image. What drew you to it, any interesting little anecdotes around it, or email me kim@kimayres.co.uk. Okay, so email me your image or stick it in the groups, and next week then I will go through the negative space submissions, and hopefully what we're going to do with that is inspire each other. And this is the point of these challenges as well. Part of it is go out and try it. If you really don't have time, then raid your archives, see if you can find something that would fit the topic. But it would also be really quite fun for you to go out and try something, try different bits and pieces. Like I said, revisit last week's podcast if you want to get a few more ideas. And then next week, when we go through the images, we can see how everybody else has actually approached this subject. And while I will give out smug points for my favourites, ultimately what these challenges are about is so that you can see how other people have done it, take some ideas, steal the ideas, try them out yourself, put your own spin on them, and learn and improve your understanding of photography. Matt, what have we got here? Nadia says great podcast, especially with the interaction. Yeah, I think the polls have kind of been fun. In fact, actually, I'll tell you what, I will just end that poll now and see how that one turned out. So niche or not, bit of both, 57%. Not niche, 42%. Go niche, 0%. Okay, so that's changed. That is different from the original one. Interestingly, when we started, the go niche was 28%. Now it's 0%. More people have gone for the bit of both. I find that really fascinating. Matt says, well, I joined at the very end. We'll try and be here in time next week. I'm working on Sunday, so it is time consuming. Fair enough, Matt. Fully understand that. These are all recorded, so if you just go to the Kim Ayres, at Kim Ayres YouTube channel, find the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres playlist, you can find all previous 253. I'm not expecting you to go through them all, but you can scan through them, find an interesting one. You'll tend to find most of them have got a little menu breakdown, leap in and out, find little bits that you might find interesting. But yeah, I do hope you can come along, do hope you become one of the regulars. As you've seen, we've got a friendly group here who's very welcoming. Right, okay, so yes, get your photos in for Friday for next week for the Negative Space Challenge, Saturday morning at the absolute latest, but I do need time to be able to compile them all. Right, so that brings us to an end. Thank you ever so much for everybody for taking part, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, bye-bye.